A lot of people think that doing something like that is completely out of their routine and potentially completely out of their comfort zone. A lot of people that I work with haven't really done anything with art since they were in elementary school or middle school, and it's just very foreign and very scary a lot of times, and they don't realize that doing something like that is completely out of their skill set. What happens is their brain gets completely occupied with this task that seems so weird and uncommon to them, that they're giving the other side of their brain a bit of a break. And when they get back to their routine lives, it's almost like they hit a reset button.
Hey guys, before we get started, I have one quick favor to ask of you. Can you please hit the subscribe button so that more people can find the show? Thank you. Diana, welcome to Give Yourself Some Leeway. I have been dying to have this episode for so long since our first conversation. When you told me about your TEDx speech on creativity as an antidote to burnout, it sparked so many conversations that I had with other guests in the past who explored the idea of creativity or art as a way of healing burnout, but they had no experience with it. It it kind of piqued their curiosity to say maybe it would help or maybe it wouldn't. I'm not sure. So, but when you reached out and said this is what you do, having creativity as an antidote to burnout, that really piqued my interest. What linked creativity and healing burnout for you?
I think, like for many of us, it started with a personal story and a personal journey. I was managing an art gallery for a very long time. And after the crash of 2008, there obviously were a lot of ups and downs, mostly downs. And I was managing a team, which was a sales team, and I was just finding myself with countless sleepless nights, extremely stressed out, on the verge of being burnt out. And at some point, my husband actually, when he was noticing how irritable I was, how I would snap for no reason, or seemed to be no reason, it was a very telltale sign for him that I was not balanced and I was not calibrated enough. And he was the one that said, actually, you need to head to the studio and do something about it and see if going to art and kind of finding yourself through art again as an artist as opposed to a manager would help you in some way. And it did absolute wonders for me because, as you and I touched upon before, a lot of people think that doing something like that is completely out of their routine and potentially completely out of their comfort zone. A lot of people that I work with haven't really done anything with art since they were in elementary school or middle school, and it's just very foreign and very scary a lot of times. And they don't realize that doing something like that is completely out of their skill set. What happens is their brain gets completely occupied with this task that seems so weird and uncommon to them, that they're giving the other side of their brain a bit of a break. And when they get back to their routine lives, it's almost like they hit a reset button and they're completely refreshed, and whatever lessons and insights they got during this process of creating art. And it's what I think is really important about it is that it's a process. It's not about a product. And a lot of us are, so there's such a stigma around it, potentially because we are expecting so much out of ourselves in terms of a product that we come up with. But it really is about this journey of traveling deep within, of finding your little boy inside or little girl inside and what they like to do when they're 4 or 5, and how freeing it is to just play and rediscover that sense of play through art. Um, and ever since I tried it for the very first time back then, I can definitely catch that very specific moment in time where I feel overwhelmed. I feel like all of these emotions are coming on and I can't calibrate myself. And to me, that is a telltale sign that I need to head to the studio. I need to do something. And it doesn't have to be this devoted chunk of time. It could even be a 5-minute little doodle, right? Or a 10-minute exercise. But just that completely brings me back to center, into focus, and just gives me and tons of people that I've worked with, hundreds of people in the corporate space, within the conferences that I participated in, I can sense it, that methodology that I go through that I'm sure we'll touch upon with the Spark method, how it changes people when they get into flow.
Yeah, when you first started off there about using art when you're burnt out, because if someone said to me when I burnt out, they said, "Oh, what you need to do is unlock your creative side," I would have rolled my eyes and said, I've got enough on my plate right now. The last thing I want to do is get a coloring book, or the last thing I want to do is get a canvas and try to do something I've never done before, or try to learn a new skill. Like when I burnt out, I looked up everything that people told me about burnout, every burnout recovery thing they said, and it was like, do your yoga, do your mindfulness, breathing, everything. And I said, okay, I'm just going to speed run through all of these things, get over this burnout thing, and go back to normal. That was the mindset I was in. So if someone told me I needed to unlock my creative side, I was in such a high productivity burnout loop that the idea of taking a step back to find my inner child would have seemed like it would have seemed so foreign to me. Do you experience a lot of difficulty when you, let's say, go into a boardroom and take out the crayons and you're saying it's time to bring out your inner 4 year old? Do you get a lot of let's say confusion or tension from people?
You know, it's actually the opposite. The hardest part for me is getting into that room because there is such stigma, I think, around how uncreative we all are. And the very first thing that people say to me when they end up in this room is, I don't know, I only know how to do a stick figure. I don't know how to create anything. I probably draw like a 4-year-old. And when I tell them that this is exactly what I want you to do, I want you to tune into your 4-year-old and just start with basic shapes. What that actually does is relaxes them, because then there's no pressure. There's no race for productivity. It's really all about that bringing back of time that we're not giving ourselves. And even with my own practice, I'm feeling like a lot of it, it really is about teaching myself patience and knowing that things take time to develop, which often we are just not ready to give ourselves. And that is part of this art making practice, where even if I'm only there once, people walk out being completely surprised at what they're able to accomplish if they're able and willing to just let themselves go and tune into that inner child.
So people need to be willing to let themselves go to tune into that inner child. Is that hard to access for some, or does it something that they can access within that um exercise of the art, or is it something that takes a while for people to get comfortable with? I mean, they might start with the basic shapes, or they might start with a simple drawing, and maybe the exercise helps to um helps them to overcome that barrier, or to lower their barrier a bit. But do you feel that it takes longer to become more comfortable with experiencing that inner child within them?
I think what happens during the process is everybody gets very excited at the outset when they're given complete freedom in terms of letting their spirit out and being that little kid again and having an opportunity to play. And then for a while, probably the first 20 to 25 minutes, you can even see it in people's faces. They get a lot more animated. They kind of look like those 4-year-olds who are just trying stuff out and getting really excited about mixing colors or playing with clay or feeling into textures. But then towards the end, something turns on in a lot of people's heads where they're now thinking, okay, it is almost the end of our time together, and I'm going to be judged. And the worst judge that's out there is definitely themselves, because even though they may have walked in saying, I haven't done this since elementary school, they still have very, very high expectations of themselves. And they're looking over their shoulder to what their neighbor is doing. And for those people who have a hard time letting go of control and aren't really able to completely dissolve into the process, that part of our time together is very, very hard to not turn into that devil on their shoulders saying, oh my God, what have you created? This is complete piece of trash. You're just gonna walk out of here and put it in the garbage. What is important to recognize, and that's what I point out during the experience, is that whatever they're struggling with during this exercise is an excellent mirror of what they're struggling with in real life. So if somebody has a hard time letting go of control, that is probably something they need to look into in general. Or if somebody is getting stuck in the center, that probably means that they're always extremely attentive to details, but fail to see the big picture. And it is so incredible how accurate and telling it is. And the one thing that I do at the very end, which I haven't been doing when I first started with these workshops, but I really find that it is essential in terms of turning off that devil on your shoulder, that incredible self-critic, is having a critique in the end, which is the opposite of a critique. It's sort of like a closing circle where I'm not allowing them to say anything bad about what they've created. I'm asking them to think about where they succeeded and what they enjoyed the most. And then I invite everyone to contribute and offer feedback. And it is incredible how everyone walks out with so much more vibrancy and energy and self-confidence and team bonding, because they're hearing things that don't expect to be hearing from their coworkers, that have nothing to do with their work environment or work ethic or productivity. It's something completely unrelated. And it's beautiful because they had this opportunity to be in the same room with people they see on the daily basis and look into them from a much deeper level and a much more profound level as humans, as little kids that were out to play. And that's so rare.
I find it so fascinating that this is what you do. I ran a workshop a few months back to help people understand the importance of clear communicative feedback. And it was similar where I got them to I had one person had to draw a picture, and the other person had to communicate to them non-verbally what they wanted them to draw. So I would show the let's say the communicator what I wanted them to get their artist to draw. And I'd show a basic picture. It was like a 4-year-old's coloring book, and I'd show them, oh, it's a circus seal with a ball on its nose. And they would have to like kind of act it out or mime it like charades. And you could see who was getting frustrated when they couldn't communicate what they wanted to,
Mhm.
non-verbally, and also when the artist saw the end result of what they were supposed to draw. There was one who just picked up a marker and scribbled out everything that they had drawn because it did not match what they were expected to draw or what was supposed to be on the drawing, and they scribbled out the whole thing because they were so frustrated that they got it wrong. And that to me signaled a lot about who they were as a person and how they respond to failure. And it just helps you to see the things that would not come to the surface if you ask them point blank, if you asked them a direct question and said, how do you respond to failure? What's your relationship with success versus failure, with risk? And these are the things that could not be, again, don't come to the surface or could not be visualized if not for the exercise or the workshop activity. They're things that we may not even notice within ourselves. So that's what I find fascinating about these creative exercises.
Such a great exercise. That sounds amazing. And one of my favorite phrases that I picked up from Chinese and Japanese calligraphers that, as you can imagine, they do these very specific movements that they train for decades and decades. And it involves this very, very quick movement that starts from the shoulder. And naturally, over the years of practicing, they have tons and tons of mistakes. And the greatest thing that they say is that there's no such thing as mistakes in art. It's all a matter of what you turn it into. And I think this is such an amazing reflection on our relationship with mistakes and how we approach them and what we get out of them. Because what I also see is that the best results, what I do in a lot of these workshops is I use timers. And I find that when I set a timer and I tell people that they have 5 minutes left, when they know that they've been with me for about an hour and there are only 5 minutes left, that's when all of their shoulds and tensions go away. And they're like, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to create whatever I wanted to create from the get go, but I was afraid because of some perceived judgment of myself. And the best results come out in those 5 minutes because they are those happy accidents where they just truly release whatever they were holding on to. And that message comes from the heart, comes from the spirit. It's that true kind of child being like, okay, this is my last hurrah. I'm just going to go for it. And it's so incredible to watch because if you told someone that you're going to create your best mark in the last 5 minutes of class, they wouldn't believe you. But that is exactly what happens if you are allowing for happy accidents to come through and you give it time. That's when the best stuff really comes out.
Hey, it's Eugene, and I want to share this milestone with Give Yourself Some Leeway. So in 2025, the podcast has surpassed 150 episodes. We've created a safe space for high achievers to be vulnerable, to share their experience with stress, overwhelm, and burnout, and help others in the process. And while I'm celebrating this milestone, I still feel like I've missed the mark. You see, people tune into every episode, they listen to every conversation, but they still tell me that they're lost, stuck in a rut, unsure of where to go next. And I totally get that. I mean, I used to listen to 8, maybe 10 hours of podcasts every day, but still not take any action to move the needle. You see, if you change nothing, then nothing changes. So if you want to break the burnout cycle and you don't know what the first step is, let me help you out. If you take 5 minutes today and answer a few questions, I can send you a personalized roadmap on how to break the burnout cycle and start beating burnout today. And if you say to yourself, Oh, I don't have 5 minutes to take out of my day. I've got way too much to do. I'm overwhelmed as it is. I've got too many priorities. I've been there. Just ask yourself, how can I take care of others if I don't know how I'm showing up for myself? You deserve to give yourself that leeway. You deserve to give yourself 5 minutes to see where you stand. So click the link below and I'll send that report straight to your inbox today. Do you feel that that has to do with procrastination? That when they realize they have the hour, they think too much or they overthink what they need to do? Oh, I have an hour, I need to plan out everything. But if they were given a shorter time scale, would they feel either too pressured or would they, or do you think they go into that happy accident mode quicker? If they didn't have such a long period of time to overthink what they need to do, if it was on a shorter time scale, would they say, okay, I've got 5 minutes to plan, or let's say it was 10 minutes, and you give them the last 5 minute timer, and they say, okay, I've only got 5 minutes, no more time for thinking, get the work done. Do you feel that 1 hour is too long? That they can feel the pressure in the last 5 minutes?
I think it depends on the complexity of the exercise. So the hour is important if there are a number of techniques that they're learning. And it's important for people to have a little bit of time to tune into it and to practice and to kind of see how things blend together, because you go from step one to step two to step three. And then you need to figure out how to bring it all together. And then towards the end, in those last 5 minutes, that is when they already know what they're doing. They already understand how things are supposed to come together. But maybe that is the point where they're starting to overthink things a little bit. And that just gives them that jolt to their system to be like, okay, I already know what I'm doing. There was something that I wanted to say from the beginning, and now is the time to do it. And all of that procrastination goes away. There's another type of exercise that is a strictly timed exercise. And what's amazing about our brains is that we transition in terms of our speed completely depending on how much time we have. So when I do figure studies, for instance, and I tell people you have 30 seconds to sketch out the whole figure, their first reaction is, what do you mean I have 30 seconds? This is not going to be real. There's no way I'm going to get anything done. And if it's just basic shapes, it's amazing how quickly things can be put down on paper, and then they get a minute and it feels like, oh my goodness, I just got double the time, right? And every time you add an extra minute, our brains adjust and they then start procrastinating more and more or start adding more and more detail. But it's really incredible to play with time and to see how much time we think we have, how much time we think we don't have, and how much time you actually need to get into the flow or into that zone of creation.
This exercise where you want someone to embrace their inner 4 year old, is this something that you learn in art school to help people to unleash that level of creativity? Is it something that's common practice? Or is it something that you found works as a tool for people who have not accessed that creative side of themselves for a long time? If you're in a corporate environment and there is no room to be creative, as they would probably say, and if you haven't had, as I say, oh, I haven't drawn pictures since I was in school, um, is it a tool that you developed because you realized people were not accessing their creativity?
Yes, it's definitely not something that I learned in art school. Art school is the complete opposite. You spend hours and hours and hours standing in front of a model, and it's a lot of critiques that are the other type of critiques in terms of everything that you did wrong. I think it came to me after working with a lot of 4-year-olds and just seeing how free they are in terms of going for it and not thinking twice about it. And it's the kids teaching me a lesson on how to better communicate this sense of innocence and freedom and needing to feel like those little kids, specifically in high pressured environments, because people in those environments just don't have a chance to do that all that much. And they talk a lot about innovation and productivity and mental health and wellness for employees. But what does that really mean? Does it mean that they give you a bit of a discount on a gym membership, and then you decide what you want to do with it? Does it mean that maybe once in a while you go to an escape room or one of those things and you have some sort of a team bonding experience? Or can it provide a skill set or a tool set that you can access, even if it is just 5 minutes, if you're pressed for time, or 10 minutes, that you can have access to whenever you feel that rise of anxiety or overwhelm or stress coming on.
Yeah, I like that you touched on that. It was really the element of fun. It's it they throw around all the other buzzwords around mental health and mental health awareness and resilience. And it's learning to have fun again. That was something that took me a while to learn because I was so focused on peak performance, high productivity, work and work and work, always go, go, go. But anytime I'd sit down and say, look, make space for fun, make space for creativity, as you say, I'm like, oh, I don't have time for fun. I need to be an adult now. I need to get this done. I have responsibilities, no time for fun. And it was that negative self narrative that told me having fun is like there's no time for fun. It's all responsibilities and getting status, getting validation, getting higher responsibilities, and not having space for fun. Isn't it all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy? It was it was that realizing that making time for fun, that we need to make time in our week for fun so that we can recharge our capacity, even having our space for creativity, having space for self-reflection allows us to show up better in terms of productivity because just as we train any muscle in the gym, we also have to train the ones that we are weak at. So if we're weak at creativity, okay, we need to train that because these things have an antagonistic relationship with other things that we do. If we access our creativity, that might help us in how we do time management or decision making or how we relate to others. As you picked up the skills in the exercise that you did, where you can see, oh, this is what frustrates one manager, or this shows that a manager has issues with control. These are things that we might find in our own self-reflection as we embrace these creativity exercises.
And you know how they always talk about how you can only be productive when you are serving from an overflowing cup, right? And you have to fill your cup in order to be able to give to your company, to your community, to your family. And I think this mentality of go, 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 go is actually doing us a disservice because there's no balance there. And you very quickly lead yourself to burnout without knowing how to bring yourself back to focus, bring yourself back to balance. And if we started to look into changing our mentality and thinking more about balance, then my best ideas come to me in the shower, right? When I am not thinking about anything in particular and I have this free time, whether it's, 5 or 10 minutes, but it doesn't really matter what I was saying, how much time you have. It's knowing that it's not a planned work time when most brilliant ideas come to you. It's when you least expect it. It might be when you're floating down the river, when just when, like we discussed in terms of Basel summer months. And most likely, I know in some companies, they actually give you forced time off so that you have to kind of figure out what to do with yourself, maybe be bored for a little bit and not feel like you have to overschedule yourself. And you can get in touch with that side of you that you haven't touched upon in years and years, or try something that you haven't tried before.
Yes, I love that because it brings me back to an example of my work phone. I did the battery died. I went to recharge it. I can't remember the last time I turned that phone off. And next thing it asked me for the PIN code. And I was looking at it being like, I should know this. I'm good with numbers. I usually know these things off by heart. I know like the PIN code from the first ever phone I had when I was like 10 years old. And next thing I was looking at being like, I can't for the life of me think of the PIN code. And it was bugging me so much that I ended up getting down to the last attempt, being like, why am I not remembering this number? And next thing I just turned the phone down and went for a walk, went for a 5 minute walk, just left and said, oh, I'm not even thinking about that. And next thing on my way back from the walk, it just came to me. I was like, of course, this is the number. Why couldn't I think of this 10 minutes ago? And it was correct, but it was that I had to stop overthinking it, and I had to go into that default mode for my brain to access wherever it was storing that hidden pin code. And just as we
Mhm.
mentioned as well about, because I was just before we started, I was telling you about in Basel we have this swim called the Rhine schwimmen, and it's where people get into the river at one end, and then they just have these little bags that they put all of their gear into all their clothes and roll out the bag so that they can float using this bag, and then they float up the river for 2 miles. And while you're floating, well, there's not much you can do, so you're either alone with your own thoughts, enjoying the scenery, or chatting with friends as you're all floating along. And it's just this serene moment in the summer where you don't have to think about work, or you don't have to think about anything else for the 20 or 30 minutes it takes you to float up the river. And it's just so peaceful. It's not even a form of escapism. It just feels something tranquil that you don't have to think about anything else for that 20 or 30 minutes. And for me, since I moved here, it's a great way to recharge or to reset.
Yeah, I just got back from the Kripalu Center that we have in Western Massachusetts. And one of the exercises that I did that seemed a little odd to me, because I've walked through tons of them in my life, was a meditative labyrinth walk. And I thought, what could be special about just going in a circle in a labyrinth and trying to get to the center? Um, and the exercise was that you think about things that you want to release as you're walking towards the center. You're thinking about things that you want to receive as you're standing in the center, and there's a little altar. And then you're thinking about things that you want to return back to life with as you walk out of this labyrinth. And I remember that as I was walking in a circle and trying to get to the center, and I was really kind of racing to get to the center, because that idea of we have a goal, right? I had that goal to get to the center, and I was rushing towards it. I wasn't getting any messages. And then when I was in the center, I wasn't getting any messages. And it felt very frustrating as an experience. And then only when I was walking out, that's when it finally hit me what the message was. And you would think that there's not much to the process of walking, but at the same time, it is such an incredible meditative process, especially for those people who can't imagine themselves sitting still in a lotus position trying to meditate, right? And in my workshops, that's what I usually start with, because I feel like in this Spark methodology that we talked about, letter S is for staying present. And I believe that people need to really feel into the space where they are, as well as their current state of mind, whether it's positive or negative, and just being fully present for that. And being attuned to the sounds and the movement, the smells in the space, and to truly be present before starting on any sort of creative exercise. Or I think that would just be something that all of us would benefit so much from if we stopped for a little bit during each day.
So we've started the Spark framework
Yes.
finally. So we start with staying present. What's next? What's P?
Letter P is for paying attention, and you pay attention as you're creating this work of art. So we talk about composition and how we don't want things to be in the center, because when they are, your eyes get stuck to the center. You want something kind of pointing in all four different directions, and you want to leave a lot of breathing room for space, because a lot of times we just want to fill everything in. But it's also a metaphor for being present and paying attention to everything that comes up, all of the insecurities that might come up because you're so out of your comfort zone, all of the feelings of anticipation, but also anxiety, but also whatever is kind of creeping in, depending on what you have going on, because at the end of the day, this is a very cathartic process. And that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to pull up all of these emotions and act as an outlet for you to release any tension that you might be holding. So that letter P is incredibly key in terms of just being mindful of where you are, how you're putting marks down. It's almost like you're paying attention to every single step that you're making, which is something that we never do.
And is that something that people are just uncomfortable with or ignorant of? Is it that we're living on autopilot and don't know how to pay attention to ourselves? Or is it something that's niggling in the back that, oh, there's something that I'm not addressing here, but it's uncomfortable?
I think we're just completely living on autopilot, and we are not really attuned to the sounds in the morning or the sounds at night or the flowers on our path, um, or people that we quickly pass maybe every single day. And it's forcing yourself to be here. That is so hard for us, but so useful when you finally arrive.
Yeah, that morning, let's say, people not being in tune with the sounds in the morning. Maybe it's bird song, or maybe it's the sound of the kettle boiling, or all of these small things that happen throughout our day, and even just being mindful in those little moments. I think it was Eckhart Tolle was the first place I heard about being mindful in those small moments is more impactful than a 40-minute meditation. That being mindful in those moments, whether it's drinking your morning coffee and being mindful of the smell, the steam, the taste, everything in that moment is more grounding for someone who has a busy day than the anxiety of or the restlessness of trying to force yourself into a 40-minute sitting meditation. Um, so that was so we have staying present and then paying attention to ourselves. What comes next?
The next part is that very fun part that we've been talking about, and that is letter A, which is allowing yourself to play. So that is when I would say, and now you're going to imagine that you're 4 years old again, and that you just learned how to make basic shapes, and you start from there. And that is the part that gives people permission to play and permission to be who they truly are at their core, and they maybe have been suppressing for decades and decades. And it's such an incredible exercise. And I think it's very important that it comes in that order, because you can't really tune into your inner child unless or until you are able to recognize and acknowledge all of your emotions, not just the pretend Instagram account, but all the good and all the bad, and where you truly are at this moment in time, which can be very different today than tomorrow or a week ago. And once you go through that kind of presencing, staying present, and paying attention to your full state of mind, emotional, physical, spiritual, that's when you truly are able to go really deep within to access that little child that needs some TLC.
Yes, think that's something that a lot of people try to avoid, that they're trying to be this adult self with the responsibilities as I used to be before, but it's learning to have fun with that inner child, learning to accept it as a part of you. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with IFS, the internal family systems?
Yes.
It's a
Mhm.
it's understanding that that is a part of you. It's not something to be shunned away because it served you, or it probably is still of service to you in some way. But it's when you have that tension or that bad relationship with that part of yourself that we start seeing things come up in ways that we don't understand. So it's starting with staying present and then paying attention to ourselves, having that relationship with our inner child and embracing it and understanding the need for it. And when it is of service and when it's not of service to us, it's when we understand that relationship with our inner child that life gets so much more meaningful, and so much more, um, you get so much more comfortable with expressing and validating those feelings. I feel that a lot of the pressures that we put on ourselves really just become crystal clear, that it was never really a worry, or that was just an a negative self narrative that I came up with, that I conjured in my own mind. No one else was ever putting that pressure on me. Those things all become clear when we learn how to embrace that inner child, as you say.
Mhm. And most of the tension that we have in our lives comes from those shoulds that may be the shoulds that are just floating in your head from a story loop that you've created over the years, and have nothing to do with what you actually need at the moment. And I'm part of the entrepreneurs organization, and they talk a lot about at EO about core values. And I think a lot of us don't really have a sense of what our core values are unless you really go back to your childhood and you think about what life was like when you were that free spirit and you were just learning about what makes sense to you, what excites you, what scares you, but you're still going for it. And as adults, we lose that ability to go for it despite being scared. And I think art teaches you that it's okay. It's okay if you make a mistake. It's okay to try and fail and then try again and then fail again. And the more mistakes you make, the quicker you get to what's truly important.
Yes, that's something that obviously a lot of entrepreneurs is helping them to learn how to fail quickly and how to fail forward. That rather than seeing the risk or the fear of failure, it's, well, the faster you fail, the faster you learn. And if you're going to avoid risk because it makes you feel safe, because you're not failing, you're not taking any action. And so the parameter for tracking success is how fast are you failing? And if you're repeating the same failure, then you're not learning from it. You're not failing forward. You're just staying in that same loop of doing the same thing. So it's learning to fail forward. I like what you brought up about the inner child, the core values. People bring this up a lot about something is not aligned with their values. Oh, I don't like that. It's not aligned with my values. And they get very defensive. But as soon as you ask them, then what are your values? How can we get in alignment with them? They don't understand what their values truly are. So that's a very good point where you go back to your childhood. What did you value as a child? And once you get curious and start asking yourself these questions, what did you value as a child and as you were growing up? You can ask yourself, do you still value that today? Because I know what I valued in my as a child is not the same things that I valued when I was in university. The things that I valued when I was in university are not the same things I value in my 30s. That
Mhm.
I can allow some value to change, and others do carry through those years. Curiosity is a big one of mine that I felt when I don't have curiosity, I get bored, I get restless, and I'm striving to learn something new. If I'm not learning something new, I feel like I'm not growing. So I found that that was a particular value of mine that I need to feed into in order to feel like I am growing. And part of that is serving others and teaching others because there's so much that we learn about ourselves when we teach others.
Yeah. And just recently, someone asked me, why is it that I feel that it's my mission in life to bring people back to the joy of being a child? And to me, it is such an incredible talent and gift that I was given for a purpose, and to bring people to these experiences where they can truly feel like themselves again. It's such an honor and something that I definitely don't take lightly. And if only we were given more opportunities to tune into what our core values really are, I think in general, we would be much happier people. Because at the outset, a lot of these things do stem from childhood, just like a lot of our trauma stems from childhood. A lot of these misconceptions and tensions and shoulds, for being an adult, for being a productive member of society, all of that comes from the trauma of growing up and losing sight of those core values.
So
And
now that
then,
we've
of
allowed
course, that,
ourselves, yeah,
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 and that, of course, that
yes.
brings me to the letter R, which is us trying to be adults and always thinking about the end result. And what are we going to present? How are we going to be judged for this presentation? And letter R is releasing the end result and focusing on the journey of the experience and the process, because we've been trained out of enjoying the process. We've been trained to focus on goals, to set goals, to constantly tick off boxes and to-do lists. And that element of being in the process, dissolving into this element of learning something new, that element of curiosity, that I definitely think if we're not curious, if we're not trying something, we are not growing. And if you don't grow, you die. It could be a very metaphorical death, obviously, but you're just not, you're just dead inside. And that's even worse, going through life and being dead inside.
Yeah, and it's a very morbid reality. Because that was my reality when I first burnt out, and I asked myself, um, like, where do I see myself in 5 years? And I didn't see myself. It wasn't that I was depressive or anything. It was just I haven't planned that far ahead. I was only planning where I was going to be in work the next 6 months, and reevaluate then if I like it or not, but not any future planning. I was just living on autopilot and saying, okay, let decisions be made for me. I'm not in control. But it was by taking control and understanding what aligned with what was dear to me, what were my values now in my 30s, that helped me to realize this is what serves me and this helps me to serve others too. That I by being able to recharge myself and serve others to a greater capacity, I felt more fulfilled.
And that kind of brings us back to the very beginning of our conversation in terms of the stigma around thinking of something that is way out of your comfort zone as a solution, or trying to stay within that comfort zone, to not ripple any waves, to not do something that's out of our routines or out of the ordinary, and hoping that things will change. Because if that is the case, then you're always in this victim mentality, and things are always done to you as opposed to done for you, so that you could step to that next level, or you could make that choice. Because it is all about making choices every single minute of every single day. And at the end of the day, you are that person that is making the choice to do nothing, right?
And that leads us into K.
Yes. Yes, beautiful leading into K, because K is about being kind to yourself, which I find is the hardest part, for all of us, regardless of whether you are in this creative practice, or you're just going through everyday life, because we are so quick to judge ourselves, and we are our worst critics. And a lot of times, I have these moments where, in this critique that I was telling you about, when everybody is standing in a circle, despite my trying to really get people to think about positives and things where they succeeded, if there was a very clear intention that they had from the get-go, and if they weren't able to let go, and if they're still attached, and that's a whole other discussion, right, on our attachment to what we think should happen, right? And they are very unhappy and very, very hard on themselves. The people in the room learn a lesson, because a lot of times I had this happen where we're all standing in a circle. It's our last class after a 6-week intensive. And we're all looking at this beautiful painting that this woman created. And she's standing there and she says, "Oh, I hate it. This is the worst thing. This is totally not what I intended to do. It went in a completely different direction." And everyone is just so amazed, because we're seeing something totally different. And they're realizing that this is what we all do, that other people might be thinking that what you have created is absolutely stunning and worth, hanging up on the wall, or getting some lessons from, at the very least. And you are the one that doesn't see it. You are the one that thinks that other people think that this isn't a worthy exercise, or this isn't a worthy product. And what we often think others think of us is so off the mark because we are so incredibly mean to ourselves. And even after 30 years of being an artist and having my own practice, I just realized the other day when I was sketching something that was very, very detailed, I would catch myself with these thoughts of beating myself up for, I was sketching this fallen angel, a sculpture of a fallen angel, and I was beating myself up on not getting the anatomy right away, not getting the proportions right away. And if I do this to myself, right, after 30 plus years of being a professional artist, what are people doing to themselves if this is a completely new experience? And I think that is really the largest challenge for all of us, and for me as a facilitator, is to get people to a place where they recognize that what they have created and the lessons that they've learned from this process are so much more important than they think, and so much better than their thoughts of themselves, and what they initially, in those first 5 to 10 seconds of judgment, of self-judgment, are thinking about this experience. But it's also the best part, listening to people's opinions and what things are resonating, and recognizing that we're all part of this human condition of going through this process of judging ourselves, of suffering from lack of self-confidence, or inability to let go, or whatever lessons we're all learning. It's amazing to know that we're all learning them together. And that's why I love ending with letter K.
I love that because for me as well, it was learning to have self-compassion. It was a big skill that I needed to invest in, because if I spoke to my best friend the way that I spoke to myself, I wouldn't have many friends. And
Mhm.
it was when I realized how I put other people up on pedestals and did not do the same for myself. And if anyone questioned me on, it's like, oh, like, are you doing okay? And I'd always brush them off, say, oh, I'm fine, no matter what I was going through. And then I beat myself up afterwards for saying, like, what did you like? Why haven't you been taking care of yourself that people are concerned about you? And it was having that negative self narrative where I would belittle or berate myself for not taking care of myself, rather than asking myself if I was okay, if I needed more time to take care of myself. Did I need to take a step back from things? It was when I didn't show the same concern for myself as I did for others, I knew that something needed to change. And for me, learning to speak to myself as I would my best friend was a game changer in terms of recovery. I stopped pushing myself to do things I didn't that I knew didn't serve me, just because it looked like it was giving me status or validation. I was doing things because I either that I knew they were good for me, or I knew that this would help me long term. This is something that was uncomfortable that I need to address. And doing it from a place of compassion and understanding meant more than it coming from a place of, oh, you need to meet others' expectations. Even though they weren't really others' expectations, they were just the expectations I set of myself and told myself others expected them of me.
Exactly. And I think the beauty of tying all of this together is that, for me, just the other day, when I was being very, very harsh with myself, I thought back to my childhood and the person that was the most important person in my life, and that was my grandfather, and why that was. And I recognized that the reason why that was the case was because out of all of my immediate family members, he was the most encouraging, he was the most supportive, and that maybe I need to become that kind of grandfather, mentor person to myself when that self-critic starts to act up. Because if we can become our best friend and talk to ourselves as a mentor or as a best friend or as that teacher that truly changed our lives in a positive direction in some way, then we could avoid burnout. We could avoid these ridiculous expectations that we set upon ourselves, that and we could avoid the resentment and disappointment when we don't reach these very heightened expectations that we set.
So what's a simple exercise that someone, if they want to sit down after this conversation and try to use creativity to help with their stress or overwhelm or burnout, where would they begin?
How long do you want this to be?
Let's keep this short. Let's keep it to a quick 2 to 3 minute exercise,
Okay,
because
because
then
what I
there's
would,
there's no
Mhm,
excuses if we keep them short. As
exactly.
if they're simple to do and it's only 2 or 3 minutes out of your day, that's not even 1%. That that gives people no excuse to take 3 minutes for themselves.
Mhm. Because what I would love to do is this very quick breathing exercise and then a sketching exercise that anybody can do within 2 to 3 minutes. And what that involves is, first of all, closing your eyes and taking 3 deep breaths. And once you do that, you start tuning in, because we're in our heads most of the day, tuning in and releasing any tension that you may have in different parts of your body, starting from the top of your head and release the back of your head, your jaw, opening up your shoulders and releasing your neck, opening up your heart so that whatever comes through for you truly comes from your heart, feeling into your elbows and releasing, wiggling your fingertips a little bit so that you could establish that mind-body connection. Maybe wiggling your sitting bones and truly feeling yourself on the chair or bench or ground, wherever you may be sitting. Feeling into your knees and relaxing, and feeling your feet on the ground and relaxing, releasing your feet. And then taking 5 breaths where all you're thinking about is counting out those breaths. So you're inhaling, counting to 4, holding our breath, counting to 5, and exhaling, counting to 6. So number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And before we start, a very important way to tune into the future vibration of you is a visualization exercise where you think of a cloud up above you, and up on that cloud is a future version of you, exactly a year from now. And you think about what that very balanced, happy, grateful, awe-inspired version of you could possibly be doing right at this moment. And what message might that version of you have for you today? Just give it a second to pass it on. And then you open your eyes And hopefully that feels better already. And you start thinking about those clouds up in the sky, and you've probably seen tens of thousands of clouds in your life. So what you can do is you can just start with basic shapes. And in the left-hand corner, you can start making a bunch of circles. And as you're thinking about clouds and how fluffy they are, you start pressing with the tip of your pen or pencil, whatever tool you have, around the edges, and creating a bit of a shading on the edges. And then you press a little lighter as you go towards the middle, and then maybe even lighter. And then when you get to the edge, you maybe press a little harder, and you'll see very, very quickly that you're starting to get this incredible 3D shape as you're doing this. And you could do that in one corner and kind of keep going if this feels right for you. Or you can move into the bottom right corner and think about a different type of a cloud. And maybe that is that very fun, fluffy cloud. And what you do is you make a bunch of overlapping circles. Maybe force yourself to create 50 of those overlapping circles, and you're kind of building them up one on top of another, and see how that creates a really interesting 3D shape that starts out very simply, but then gets more and more life. And then maybe in a third corner of your choice, just to give it some movement and direction, you think of a foggy cloud. And that one consists of just tons and tons of dots. And maybe you kind of force yourself to count out 50 dots. And you just keep going, and you see that over time, once again, you develop this incredibly interesting mystical shape. And that's all you need to do. It's very quick and hopefully very affirming and balancing, and something that you don't even need a lunch break for.
What I found interesting just in that exercise, it reminded me of when people would be on a Teams meeting and they're just doodling on their notepad. So it's something that innately we tend to do, just doodling on the side margins anyway, completely not even note taking, just doodling, and maybe doing like tic-tac-toe on the side with ourselves. That
Mhm.
there's this innate creativity or curiosity or this element of fun that we seek out in our day. That
Yeah.
it's not, people flag it as boredom, that it's like, oh, you're doing it because you're bored, but you're doing it because you're starved for creativity. And if you're not in touch with that side of yourself, then it seems like we have these innate processes that go towards that creative side. Because just in this exercise, it reminded me of, oh, this is like me doodling in the side margins during a meeting that I am no longer interested in, or I'm drifting away. I'm drifting away from this meeting and I'm focused on drawing clouds in the corners of the page. But if we were to take that exercise and make it more intentional, as we just have here, how much more effective would it be?
And for a lot of people, this isn't something that they do out of boredom. This is their way to process information. And it's the worst thing in the world when someone like a teacher in elementary school or middle school catches you doodling on the sides of your notebooks and shames you for it. Because right then and there, that is when most creativity is killed. When you are punished for wanting to go outside the lines and do something because your innate creativity wants to come forward. And it is just incredible how many times I hear that that is exactly what happened to people when they tried to listen in a different way, when they tried to show things to their peers in a different way, and they were just shut down by a person of authority, and they never came back to it again.
What it reminded me of is this awful line I always heard in school and in the workplace whenever someone may have been caught maybe doodling or just embracing their creative sides. Sometimes they could have just been stacking the stationery or taking a little extra time out of the day to organize everything. And they would say, "Don't quit your day job just yet."
Yeah.
And that was the biggest creativity killer for anyone. It made them
Mhm.
feel like, oh, their efforts were completely wasted. It was a waste of time. They were wasting their own efforts. They should never have even bothered. But for them, it was a form of embracing that curious and fun side of themselves. Or maybe, as you said, it was helping them to maybe access that default mode and process something else.
Mhm. Yeah. And I wish that the next generation of teachers would see that. Um, People are taking in information in very different ways. And I think there are definitely strides that are done with different seating stations versus standing stations, and um, active ways of listening, and having Audible and Kindle versus actual books. And um, but I just really hope that people start seeing that their authentic selves, if they want to come out, we should let them.
Diana, thank you. This was amazing to talk about creativity in burnout because a lot of people tend to, as you've seen, is that they dismiss or downplay the importance of having creativity. And as you said, allowing ourselves to play, allowing us to embrace that inner child, that it's such an integral part of who we are. To dismiss or downplay that part of us is detrimental to our well-being. So thank you so much for helping us to better understand how we see and use creativity in our lives.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, and I'm so happy to share. And if people want to find me, they're welcome to reach out just through my website and the contact information on the website. And Yeah, I love to talk about the neuroscience of creativity and what we can all do that could be that very quick 5-minute exercise that brings us back to our calibrated selves.